In this video, we will be factoring trinomials or quadratics so that we can find the solutions. Before we can do any of this, we need to make sure that it is in the proper form. We need to make sure that it is in a ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 form. In order for us to solve quadratics, it always has to be equal to 0. If we look at this problem here, we see that we are already in the correct form. We have the x squared, then the x value, then a number by itself, and it's equal to 0. So from here, we can factor out this quadratic and find our solutions. So the first thing we want to do is to identify our a, b, and c numbers. So our a number is 3 here. Our b number is -1 because there's an invisible 1 in front of the x. And our c number is -10. After that, we draw out our box. We'll put the first term in the first box. We put the last term, -10, in the last box. And then we need to find the two missing values that go in the other box. We have been using our calculator to do that. So what we're going to put in our calculator is multiplying the a number times the c number. So 3 times -10. That's going to give us a times c is -30. So in our calculator, in y1, we'll put -30 divided by x. And in y2, we'll put -30 divided by x plus x. So I grab my calculator, go to y equals. Y equals, I'm going to clear that. Type in the first thing right here, -30 plus x. So -30, divided by x. Then I go down to y2, and in y2, I'm going to put -30 divided by x plus x. -30. So this is what we should have in our calculator. All right. After that, I'm going to hit second and graph so I can see the table of values. And what I'm looking for is where my b number, so -1, is in the y2 column. So here's y2. I'm looking for -1, 29, error, -29, -13, -7, -3.5, -1. There it is. So these two numbers, -6 and -5, will have x's with them in the other two boxes. So -6x and 5x. After we've done that, we're going to take out the factors that are in common out of each box. On the top, we have 3x squared and -6x squared. I could take 3 out of 3 and 6 because it divides evenly. And I can also take an x out of both. On the bottom, 5x and -10, I can take a 5 out of 5 and a 5 out of -10 because that would give me 2 if I divided it. Can't take an x from the bottom because the -10 doesn't have an x. On the left side, we have 3 and 5. There's nothing that goes into 3 and 5 evenly, so it's just 1. But I can't take an x out of both because they each have an x. And then on the right side, I have -6 and -10. I can pull a 2 out because 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I can take out a -2, I'm sorry, because this is negative. Can't take out the x because the 10 again doesn't have an x. So once I've done that, I have my two binomials, the two things that when I multiply together would give me the original problem. So I have the top multiplied by the bottom. And this would equal 0, because all I've done is turn this into this. All right, so nothing changed with the equaling of 0. So once we've gotten here, we're going to break up each one of these binomials, because if we made either one of these 0, anything times 0 would be 0. So if this first thing was just 0, if I multiplied 0 times all this, doesn't matter what number this is, it would still be 0. Same thing if I made this 0 and multiplied it by whatever this would be, anything times 0 is still 0. So I'm going to take each one of these binomials and make them equal to 0 so I can figure out what my x numbers would be. So we have x minus 2 equals 0 and 3x plus 5 equals 0. And now we're just going to solve for x. So here I got x minus 2. I want to get x by itself. So the opposite of subtracting 2 would be to add 2. I'll have another color. So I'm going to add 2 here and add 2 to this side. So this one is x equals 2. On this side, first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this plus 5. So I'll subtract 5 from both sides. And then I divide by the number in front of x to get the x by itself. So this one would be negative 5/3 or negative 1.6 repeating. Right, so these are my two solutions. These are the two answers. These are the two parts of the graph that would touch the x-axis. All right. So if I was to sketch this graph out, there's 1, there's 2, negative 1, negative 2. One dot would be where x is positive 2, and another would be negative 1.6. I'm going to guesstimate that's right about in the middle between negative 1 and negative 2. All right. And then if I go and look at my calculator again, I can check and make sure I'm doing this right. I'm going to clear these. I'm going to put in the original the original equation. So 3x squared minus x minus 10. 3x squared x 10. Graph it by hitting the graph button. And you can see, I know it's difficult on this calculator, but you can see that one part of the graph on the where one x-intercept is right here at 2. Here's the middle, the origin. There's 1, there's 2. And then the other one is right here between negative 1 and positive 2. I'm sorry, negative 1 and negative 2 at negative 1.6. And our y-intercept is way down here at negative 10 because our C number was negative 10, and that tells us what our y-intercept is. So I can just sketch out what that graph will look like, and it also shows you that the answers, the solutions we got are the same whether we look at the graph or whether we do it by hand on paper. Another problem that you guys will encounter are when it's not set in the correct order. All right, like I said before in the first problem, we have to make sure everything is equal to 0. So we have to have ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. In this problem right here, it is not set equal to 0. So we're going to have to make it equal to 0 before we can proceed to the next step. So in order for me to get rid of this -2 or -2, I have to do the opposite of that to both sides. I'm going to add 2 here because -2 plus 2 would be 0. And I'm going to add 2 to the C number. I added 2 to the C number because I can't add a number to a variable to a variable. So now we still have x squared, still have -11x. 28 plus 2 is going to give us 30, and then this is 0. And now that we have it in the correct form, we can go and do what we just did in the last problem and solve for it. First thing we're going to do is identify the A, the B, the C. A is 1, B is -11, C, the number by itself, or our y-intercept, is 30. I'm going to draw my box. First term, first box. Last term, last box. Multiply A times C. So 1 times 30 gives me 30. So in the calculator, we are going to put 30 divided by x in y1. 30 divided by x plus x in y2. And then we are going to solve and figure out what our answer is going to be. Pull out a calculator that has a clear screen, one that's more better, as your English teachers would say. So y1 is 30 divided by x. y2 is 30 divided by x plus x. I again hit second and the graph button so I can see the table. And then there's our table right there. I'm looking for the B number. The B number in this problem is -11. So looking here, I'm looking for -11. I see a bunch of positives and an error, but I do see that the numbers are getting smaller as I go this way, so I'm going to keep going down until I hit a negative. So, oh, now they're getting bigger, so let's go the other way. Oh, here we go. And I found them. So it's -11 here. That means that what goes in the box is -6 and -5, each with an x in the missing boxes. So let's do that. -5x, -6x. I just got to take out the things that are in common. On the left side, I can take out an x because there's no number with the x squared. On the right side, I can take out a 5 because 5 divided by 5 is 1. 30 divided by 5 would give me 6. It's going to be a -5 because this box is negative. These two, I can take out an x, again, because there's no number with the x squared. On the bottom, I can take out a 6 because 6 can be divided into 6 or 30. And again, it'll be negative because this sign in front of the x is negative. So now I have my two factors. And I'm going to rewrite my equation with my two binomials now. X minus 5, x minus 6, still equal to 0. And then again, I'm going to set each one of these equal to 0 and solve for it so I can get my answer. So x minus 5 equals 0. X minus 6 equals 0. In order for me to get the x by itself, I have to do the opposite of subtracting 5. So I have to add 5 to both sides. Here, I'm going to get the x by itself by doing the opposite of subtracting 6, so adding 6 to both sides. X equals 6. So here's our two factors. All right. This is where our graph would touch the x-axis if we were to graph it. So let's do that in the calculator just so we can make sure that we got it right. So in my calculator, I'm going to type in the original equation, x squared minus 11x plus 30. So x squared minus 11x plus 30. I'm going to hit graph. And you can see focus that the graph is touching the x-axis at 5 and 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is right here, and then 6 is right here, 7, 8, 9. So you can see that our solutions are correct. We got the right solutions, positive 5 and positive 6. And this is how we factor so that we can find solutions of quadratic equations.